April 29th, 1945. In a bunker under Berlin, Adolf Hitler receives a piece of news from Italy. His oldest political friend, Benito Mussolini, is dead, shot 2 days earlier by his own countrymen, then strung up by the heels from a lamppost in a Milan piazza, where a crowd spent a day spitting on the body. In 1922, when Benito Mussolini marched his black shirts into Rome and simply took the government, it seemed unimaginable that this would be a reality within 30 years. Hitler at that time was still building a fringe party in Bavaria and instantly takes inspiration and plans his own march on Berlin. A year later, Hitler attempts it, but the plan does not even survive beyond the Munich beer hall, and by the time he marches his men to the center of Munich, the police is waiting for them and his coup is already over. By 1933, Hitler is chancellor, and his days of petty street fighting is over, although his party has never stopped street fighting. Hitler's brown shirts are a mirror reflection of Mussolini's black shrits. At this point, Mussolini has been ruling Italy for over a decade already, contrary to popular perception, is unimpressed and unenthused about Hitler being in power. A Germany that's strong right next door threatened to put the Ducey in the shade, and worse, a pan-German Reich would include Austria and the Balkans, which is territory Mussolini had already staked his own claims to. From the very start, it was a relationship of convivence, where Mussolini was the established dictator and Hitler was the imitator. June 14th, 1934, their first face-to-face meeting in Venice. It does not go well for Hitler. Privately, he feels Mussolini was condescending to him. Hitler flies home irritated, feeling humiliated in front of the man he'd modelled himself on. It's a small moment, but it will not stay small. 6 weeks later, on July 25th, 1934, Austrian Nazis storm the Chancellery in Vienna and murder Chancellor Dollfuss. Hitler, at the Wagner Festival in Bayreuth, can barely hide his delight when the news reaches him. But the coup collapses within hours, and Mussolini, whom Hitler had personally promised in Venice he would leave Austria alone, responds by mobilizing 4 full divisions to the Brenner Pass, right on Austria's border. Hitler backs down instantly. A year and a half later, in October 193, Mussolini invades Abyssinia, now Ethiopia, in open defiance of the League of Nations. Britain and France respond with sanctions. These sanctions are half-hearted and doomed to fail, but they are enough to permanently poison Mussolini's relationship with the West. Within the Nazi Party, this is welcome as great news, and a diary note from inside the German Foreign Office, written the very day after the invasion began, read, "Either Mussolini will stumble and get himself so heavily involved in Africa that he will be greatly weakened in Europe," whereupon Hitler concedes Austria, hitherto protected by the Deuce, or he will win, defying France and Britain, and thereupon be ripe for a tie-up with Hitler against the Western democracies. Either way, Hitler wins. The prediction is spot on because now isolated by the West and drawn toward Berlin, Mussolini sends his son-in-law and Foreign Minister Galeazzo Ciano to meet with Hitler at Berchtesgaden in October 1936. Days later, in a speech in Milan, Mussolini publicly names the new arrangement between the two powers an axis around which Europe would now turn. They are now allies of convenience, bound together mostly by their joint opposition to Britain and France. March 11th, 1938. Hitler is about to annex Austria, and he is terrified Mussolini will do again what he did in 1934. He sends Prince Philip of Hesse to Rome to speak to the Deuce, then waits by the phone all evening. Mussolini has said Austria is immaterial to him, said Prince Philip when he finally calls back. Hitler is overcome with joy and says, "Then, please tell Mussolini I will never forget him for this," he says. "Never, never, never. No matter what happens, but if he should ever need any help or be in any danger, he can be convinced that I shall stick to him whatever may happen, even if the whole world gangs up on him." The next day, After laying a wreath at his parents' grave in Linz, he sends a telegram to Mussolini. "I shall never forget you for this." May 1939. On a sudden impulse during a phone call, Mussolini proposes turning the loose Axis into a full military alliance. Hitler agrees on the spot right in the early throes of World War II. Mussolini sits out the first 9 months of the war because he knows Italy isn't ready. Then, in June 1940, with France already beaten and the German victory obvious, he now jumps into the war anyway to claim a share of the spoils. 32 Italian divisions attack 6 French ones on the Alpine front, but are not able to move them an inch. When the two dictators meet at Munich to set armistice terms, the German memo is blunt. This war has been won by Hitler without any active military participation on the part of Italy, and it is Hitler who will have the last word. The senior partner of the earlier 1934 meeting those years ago is now, quite obviously, the junior one. Emboldened by the winds of Germany, Mussolini invades Greece that October without even warning Hitler in advance. It collapses within a week. In North Africa, it's worse. A British desert force, 1/3 the size of the Italian army, curb stomps it completely, taking 130,000 prisoners. The German Navy's own report to Hitler speaks of just how devastated the Italian offence is. Hitler now has to divert German troops, the Afrika Korps, and eventually an invasion of the Balkans, just to keep Italy standing after this mess, and also delaying his own invasion of the Soviet Union to do it. The alliance that was supposed to multiply Hitler's strength became drain on it. By the summer of 1943, with Sicily invaded and Rome bombed for the first time, even Mussolini's own inner circle has had enough. On the night of July 24th, his fascist Grand Council votes 19-8 to strip him of military command and restore power to the king. That evening, the king summons him, dismisses him on the spot, and has him carted off under arrest in an ambulance. The news reaches Hitler's headquarters that night. His first instinct is rage, and even openly discusses an invasion of Italy and the Vatican in order to restore Mussolini and the alliance. For weeks, German intelligence hunts for Mussolini's location, while his captors move him from island to island to keep him from either the Allies or a rescue by the Nazis. In headquarters transcripts, he's referred to only as the valuable object, and most of Hitler's own generals, even Goebbels, privately doubt he's worth the trouble anymore. But Hitler disagrees. He finally learns Mussolini is being held at a hotel on the Gran Sasso, the highest peak in the Apennines. On September 12, 1943, an Austrian SS officer named Otto Skorzeny leads a glider assault onto the mountaintop meadow. Not a shot is fired, and within minutes he's airborne in a tiny 2-seat plane, flown first to Rome, then to Vienna. Hitler wants his old friend to immediately purge and punish the men who betrayed him, but Mussolini seems uninterested. Goebbels records Hitler's disappointment in his diary. Mussolini has not drawn the moral conclusions from Italy's catastrophe that the Führer had expected of him. He is not a revolutionary like the Führer or Stalin. At Hitler's insistence, Mussolini proclaims a new Italian social republic as a breakaway state of the original Italian state Mussolini had ruled. For the next year and a half, the puppet government, the Salo Republic, governs a sliver of northern Italy at German gunpoint at the behest of Hitler. On April 27, 1945, Mussolini and his mistress, Clara Petacci, are caught by Italian partisans near Lake Como, trying to slip into Switzerland as the war is clearly being lost by the Axis. They are shot 2 days later. That night their bodies are trucked into Milan, dumped in a piazza, and the next day strung up by the heels from a lamppost, where a crowd spends the day reviling them. On May Day, he's buried in a pauper's plot. The news reaches Hitler's bunker that same afternoon. Within hours he hands his own secretaries and his newly wedded wife Eva Braun capsules of cyanide. He'd written, in his political testament just written days earlier, that he refused to become a spectacle for his enemies, not their live selves or their bodies. One can only speculate how much of Mussolini's degradation reached him in detail. But the timing speaks for itself, and no one sees Hitler alive ever again. And suddenly, 23 years after a march on Rome gave a failed Austrian painter an idea, both men were dead within 48 hours of each other. Neither death looked anything like the glory either of them had spent 2 decades chasing.